Okay, so after the exam, I thought I'd better do a quick review. Going to be pretty fast-paced on financial forecasting. Okay, you may recall we use financial forecasting to take a bit of a peek ahead at what our business plans should look like. Gives us a bit of spare time to make some adjustments before actual things occur. If we want to buy a roof or a piece of equipment, something like that. And also if we're going to grow. And usually when we grow the business, we have to invest in either some new people and or inventory and or machinery. So it's a proposition where we have to plan our money. Other things to do is look at making targets. Um, you'll stand by if you're not growing or dying comes to mind. And most of the time, we have to provide some sort of forecasting for bankers and lenders and investors. So it's something to think about. The whole idea is we want to measure and have a look at our future and think about what's going to happen, make some decisions about it or plan for it. And ultimately, if we look backward when we're all done, we can have look at how we're performing. And sometimes we can do that as the business is running as well. Okay, so just a reminder is used to get loans, make decisions, pay dividends, save up for capital purchases. My favorite excuse for doing one actually is to avoid surprises. I've been in the situation where turn around and go to write checks for payroll, for instance, and go, oh, we haven't got enough money to make payroll, then we have to run out and get some money somehow. So this is the sort of thing we're talking about. We really want to avoid those kinds of surprises. Okay, so the first step is to get a sales projection. We can consult with our people in the business and maybe our advisors and say, all right, how many can we sell next year, or what dollar figure we're going to shoot for. If we think we can sell 10, then let's set a goal for selling 12. Just make it a bit of a stretch goal, that sort of thing. But the idea is still we have to come up with some sort of a projection. Again, from the sales projection, we can look at how much inventory to buy, maybe how many employees we need, whether we got to buy or rent any equipment or space, or whatever the case may be. The whole idea is it starts getting us ready. Okay, there's nothing worth in saying, oh, we're going to sell this much and then forgetting about it. We have to plan it. Okay, again, here's our quickie diagram of how things go. We start with a sales projection. If we require a production plan or inventory plan of some sort, a purchasing plan, that would be the next step. If we've got to hire anybody and train anybody, that sort of thing too. If there's any other supporting budgets, for instance, the sales projection might determine that we have to buy some equipment. We'll be using a cash budget actually, and this is a big step. Some companies, me included, actually use the cash budget rather than performing right to the balance sheet. Much safer way to do things. And of course, we start with the prior balance sheet to feed things into. So that's the flow of information. And of course, to make the information flow, we have to find it someplace. So we look at our income statement, we go line by line and say, okay, is this going to be an increase or a decrease? If we're using the direct method, of course, this is line by line. And we can get quotes from insurance agents, or we can look at our rent, lease, or whatever the case may be, and continue through our projections. Once we've got all the lines filled in on the income statement, using estimates and quotes, whatever the case may be, then we can pump that through into the cash budget and the balance sheet and give us some indication as to where we're going to be. Okay, just a reminder, long-term assets are financed by long-term debt. And if the long-term assets don't change, then typically neither does the long-term debt. As well, we look at short-term debt to supply cash shortages. Maybe we have to buy a whole bunch of inventory, so we might go into some notes payable, that sort of thing. And of course, if we're projecting that we're going to have all sorts of excess cash, we look at that to pay off our short-term debt. Okay, maybe even dividends. Okay, again, with our projections, we use all sorts of things just like we do if we're starting the company, because each year, if we take it from the point of view that we're starting a company but we've got better records, we're going to be a little more accurate with our predictions, we hope. Okay, so we calculate our net profit or loss. We can have dividends if we want. Ideally, the first time out when we're doing projections. We don't really include dividends some of the time. It's just an easier thing to figure out. And of course, we put the change in retained earnings onto the balance sheet after we've got the income statement done. As well, on the balance sheet, we do line by line analysis, look at our expected inventory levels, receivables, cash, all that sort of thing. Now, we don't actually calculate the cash right away, but just keep it in mind. Are we going to have any additional capital purchases or financing go with these things? And then we calculate the owner's new equity. Okay, now, usually the balance sheet does not balance. Okay, we're going to, in this course, we're going to take it that it's going to be a bit of a difficult thing to get it to balance. Now, in real life, we usually get pretty good at this with a bit of practice, but to keep things simple, we're going to assume that it's not going to balance, and most of the time they don't, but it's not out millions of dollars. It's usually fairly close within, what do they call it, material tolerances. But in any event, we have to calculate a cash plug, and that's simply the liabilities plus the equity minus the assets going to equal a cash plug. The big danger of this thing is that it assumes that you've calculated everything correctly. Okay, and usually the problem we find where things are not calculated correctly is somewhere in the amortization or somewhere in the retained earnings. These tend to be the biggest spots where things don't get calculated accurately. Now, the problem with this sort of thing is that we're only typically looking at a year. Okay, and a year is a long time in business terms. Doesn't look at seasonality, purchases over the course of the year, that sort of thing. So we have to think of these things a little bit differently. And so what we do is we cook up something else to manage our company's cash, and that would be the cash budget.